March 17, 1943. The North Atlantic Ocean, a vast, gray, and treacherous expanse, lies 400 miles south of Iceland's coast. Here, Convoy HX-2-29 battles through 15-foot swells, its 41 merchant ships carrying a vital 140,000 tons of cargo. More than just goods, this is the very sustenance of life. Food, fuel, and ammunition. This convoy is a literal lifeline for a nation teetering on the edge of starvation. Above, on the bridge of the SS William Eustace, 28-year-old Captain James Bannerman holds tight to the rail as his ship pitches and rolls violently. He scans the dark horizon with his binoculars, just knowing what awaits them. The enemy is out there, listening intently. Beneath the waves, 600 yards off the convoy's port side, Captain Lieutenant Helmut Mensack sits in the oppressive silence of the U-758's control room. His hydrophone operator presses the headphones firmly against his ears, eyes closed, as he listens to the approaching convoy's symphony of sounds. The young German sailor whispers, "Contact, bearing 2 degrees, multiple screws, heavy machinery noise, estimating around 40 vessels." Mensack smiles, raising the microphone to his lips, and utters the words that awaken the wolf pack. What none of them realize, not Captain Bannerman on his bridge, praying for dawn, nor Captain Lieutenant Mensack, already anticipating victory, is that in the galley of that very Liberty ship, a 28-year-old ship's cook named Tommy Lawson is washing dishes. He is neither a captain nor a naval architect, nor a scientist, yet he has just noticed something peculiar, something about the way the ships sound underwater, something that has eluded every admiral, engineer, and physicist in the Allied command, something that will ultimately alter the course of the entire Battle of the Atlantic. Over the next 6 days, a massacre unfolds. Torpedoes tear apart 22 merchant ships from Convoy's HX-2-29 and SC-122, sending them to frigid depths of the North Atlantic. 300 merchant seamen perish in the icy waters. It becomes the single worst convoy disaster since 1942. In Germany, Admiral Karl Donitz, commander of the U-boat fleet, hails it as the greatest convoy battle of all time. The numbers from this month paint such a devastating picture that they are kept hidden from the British public. In March 1943 alone, U-boats sink a staggering 567,000 tons of Allied shipping, surpassing any other month of the entire war. The losses are catastrophic, unsustainable. At the current rate, Britain has only 3 months of food supplies remaining, 3 months until the nation faces starvation, 3 months until it might be forced to surrender. Prime Minister Winston Churchill, a man of unwavering resolve, later writes in his memoirs, "The only thing that ever really frightened me during the war was the U-boat peril." This was a critical juncture, the moment when the war could be lost, not on the beaches of Normandy, nor in the skies over London, but right here in the cold, dark waters of the Atlantic, and the Allies are seemingly powerless to stop it. Why? How could this be happening? The answer lies not in strategy or courage, but in sound. German hydrophone technology was brutally, terrifyingly effective. A U-boat sitting silently 400 feet below could detect a convoy's propeller noise from an astonishing 80 nautical miles away. Individual merchant ships, like the William Eustace, betrayed a precise location from up to 12 miles away. The sound signature was unmistakable. The rhythmic thrumming of cavitating propellers, the low-frequency rumble of engine vibrations, the resonance of the entire hull, all acting as a massive, screaming beacon for German torpedoes. Each Liberty ship's propeller was, in essence, a 15-foot diameter dinner bell for the sharks of the Atlantic. Allied escort vessels tried everything they could. They enforced total radio silence and forced the convoys into frantic zigzag patterns. Their destroyers and corvettes swept the seas with ASTIC, their early version of sonar, but nothing seemed to work. The convoys were simply too loud. The ocean, a perfect medium for sound, carried their location for miles, and the U-boats, hunting in their infamous wolf packs, simply had to remain silent, wait, and listen. What the Allies didn't know, what no one could possibly foresee, was that the solution would not come from a naval engineer or an acoustic scientist in a lab. It would come from a merchant ship cook, a man who had dropped out of school at the age of 14. Naval Headquarters, Liverpool, England, March 1943. The men of the Western Approaches Command have been locked in a brutal struggle against the U-boat menace for 3.5 years. They have deployed every piece of technology at their disposal, yet they have failed to stem the tide. In 1941, the Royal Navy had installed ASTIC sonar on every single escort vessel, believing it would be the decisive weapon. This active sonar could detect a submerged U-boat at 2,500 yards, but only if the submarine was directly ahead of the escort. U-boat commanders quickly learned to attack from the side or from the stern, staying outside that narrow ASTIC cone. Even worse, ASTIC was completely useless against U-boats attacking on the surface at night, precisely the tactic the Wolfpacks were designed for. Failure number 1. In 1942, scientists at the Admiralty Research Laboratory developed high-frequency direction finding, nicknamed Huff Duff. This ingenious system could track a U-boat's radio transmissions and worked perfectly for locating submarines that broke radio silence. However, the moment the Wolfpack established contact with Convoy, they ceased transmitting, they simply listened. Meanwhile, the Allied ships continued broadcasting their location, not with radios, but with every single turn of their propellers. Failure number 2. By early 1943, the Royal Navy had spent $8, $7 million, equivalent to over $500 million today, trying to solve this single acoustic signature problem. Professor Patrick Blackett, the director of Naval Operational Research, published a classified paper stating, in no uncertain terms, that merchant vessel propeller cavitation and machinery resonance create underwater sound profiles detectable at extreme range, and that, without fundamental hull redesign, impossible during wartime production. Convoys would continue to announce their positions to enemy hydrophones. The expert consensus was clear and final. It was impossible to make a 10,000-ton merchant ship quiet enough to evade hydrophone detection. It was a mere fantasy. Dr. Harold Burrell, the Admiralty's chief naval architect, explained the physics in a memo dated February 14, 1943. A Liberty ship's propeller, he wrote, rotates at 76 revolutions per minute under load, displacing 22,000 tons of water. The resulting cavitation, the bubbles forming and collapsing on the blade surfaces, generates massive acoustic energy. German hydrophones, he noted, were optimized for precisely this range of sound. To reduce that noise, he argued, would require a complete propulsion system redesign, entailing 6 months of dry dock time per vessel and demanding manufacturing capabilities that the Allies simply did not possess in 1943. The stakes could not be higher. Britain, as an island nation, imported 2/3 of its food and 100% of its petroleum by sea. And in March 1943, German U-boats were sinking ships faster than Allied shipyards could build them. At the Atlantic Convoy Conference, held in London on March 4, 1943, Rear Admiral Leonard Murray delivered a blunt and terrifying assessment to the panic room. Gentlemen, we are losing. Our escorts can't hear the U-boats because of our own convoy noise. The enemy, meanwhile, can hear us from 50 miles away. Unless we solve this acoustic detection problem, we will lose the Atlantic by summer. The room erupted in a flurry of desperate, impossible ideas. A British naval engineer proposed installing sound-dampening mounts on every single piece of machinery aboard every merchant ship at an estimated cost of $250,000 per vessel. With 2,400 ships in the convoy system, it would take 138 years to retrofit the fleet. Rejected. An American scientist suggested coating the ship hulls with rubber to absorb the sound. This was actually tested but rejected. The rubber degraded in salt water within weeks and created massive drag, reducing ship speed by 3 knots, making the convoys even more vulnerable. Rejected. A Canadian engineer proposed redesigning all propellers with swept-back blades to reduce cavitation. An excellent idea, but completely unfeasible, as it would require retooling every propeller foundry in North America. Rejected. By March 15, 1943, just 2 days before the slaughter of convoy HX-229, the Allied naval commanders accepted the grim, unmovable reality. There was no technological solution to convoy acoustic signatures. Merchant ships would continue to announce their positions to every U-boat within hearing range. The only strategy left was to add more escorts, more air cover, and hope that enough ships and enough men would survive the gauntlet to keep Britain in the war. But 800 miles to the west, aboard a Liberty ship struggling through a North Atlantic gale, a cook was about to prove every expert wrong. Thomas Patrick Lawson did not possess an engineering degree, or any degree at all. Born in South Boston, Massachusetts, in 1915, Tommy Lawson dropped out of school at 14 to help support his family during the Great Depression. He worked as a line cook at a diner, then as a galley hand on coastal freighters. He knew how to make scrambled eggs for 50 men, and he knew how to brace himself when the ship rolled. What he didn't know was acoustic physics. When war broke out, he joined the U.S. Merchant Marine at 26, not out of desire for heroism or patriotism, but because merchant ships paid $125 a month, triple what he made in Boston. He was simply a guy trying to earn a living in the most dangerous job in the world. His captain's evaluation from June 1942 was blunt. Lawson TP, ship's cook. Adequate performance. No leadership potential. Recommended for galley duties only. Nobody expects genius from the guy who makes breakfast. But Lawson had something that none of the admirals or physicists had. Time. And he spent it in a very strange place. After the SS William used to survive 3 convoy runs to Liverpool, Lawson developed an odd, almost dangerous habit during his off-watch hours. He didn't sleep or play cards. He sat in the engine room and he listened. The other crew members thought he was crazy. "Tommy's going to get himself killed down there," said First Mate Robertson. "That engine room is hot as hell and twice as loud." But Lawson wasn't there for the heat. He was there because to him, the engine room was a symphony. As a cook, he had spent his life identifying ingredients, picking out subtle flavors, and now he was doing the same with sound. He could hear the high-pitched whine of the main turbine and feel the low, shuddering thud of the propeller shaft turning in its housing. He could feel the vibration travel from the engine mounts through his feet into the steel deck and out into the water. He was there because he had noticed something. February 19th, 1943, Mid-Atlantic. The William Eustis was sailing in Convoy C-118, 63 ships in 9 columns. When a U-boat alert ripped through the night, klaxons blared. Lawson was in the engine room, crouched near the main steam line. The ship's engineer, a gruff Scotsman named Donald MacLeod, shouted at him over the roar of the turbines. "Get back to your galley, cook. This is no place for you." Suddenly, the entire ship shuddered violently. A torpedo had struck a vessel 2 columns over. Through the vibrating steel of the hull, Lawson heard it. Not the explosion itself, that was a dull, distant thud, but what came after. He heard the sound of thousands of tons of seawater rushing into the dying ship's hull, creating a strange, hollow booming sound, a final gurgling scream, and then silence. Absolute silence. The U-boats couldn't hear it anymore. The ship, in its death throes, had gone quiet. Lawson scrambled over to MacLeod, grabbing his arm, his eyes wide. The sinking ship had stopped making noise. MacLeod shoved him off, wiping grease from his face. "Of course it stopped, you bloody idiot. It's full of water. It's sunk." No, you don't understand." Lawson struggled to explain. He was an engineer. He didn't have the words. When the water flooded the hull, it stopped the machinery vibration. It dampened it. The U-boats, they can't hear it anymore. MacLeod just stared at him, his mind focused on damage control, on his own engine. He wasn't listening. So Lawson yelled, "What if we could flood parts of our ship on purpose? Not enough to sink us. Just enough to silence the machinery noise." MacLeod's expression shifted from confusion to contempt. "That," the engineer said slowly, "is the single stupidest thing I've ever heard. You want to sink us to stop us from being sunk? Get back to your galley, cook, and stay there." But Lawson couldn't let it go. For the next 2 weeks, as the William Eustis limped towards England, he sketched diagrams in a cheap notebook. He was a cook, but he understood plumbing. He understood tanks. He drew water-filled chambers built around the propeller shaft and sketched ballast tanks positioned against the main engine mounts. He was designing a system of controlled flooding. He was a physicist, but he had stumbled upon a core principle of acoustics. Water is dense and a terrible conductor of vibration. In effect, water absorbs sound. He showed his notebook to MacLeod, who dismissed him without a glance. He showed it to the first mate, who laughed in his face. He even got a moment with Captain Bannerman, who sighed exhaustively and said, "Son, I appreciate your initiative, but leave the engineering to the engineers. We have experts working on this." He was, after all, just a cook, and nobody took the cook seriously. March 24th, 1943. The William Eustis docked in Liverpool. The crew had 48 hours of shore leave. Lawson was supposed to go to a pub, find a decent meal, and forget the horrors of the crossing. Instead, he did something completely unauthorized, something potentially career-ending, something that was definitely insane. He washed his face, put on his cleanest uniform, and walked straight into the Western Approach's command headquarters. And he asked to speak to an admiral about U-boats. Tommy Lawson didn't get to see an admiral. He got arrested. 2 Royal Navy Shore Patrol officers intercepted him in the lobby of Derby House, the nerve center of the Battle of the Atlantic. This was not a place for a random American merchant seaman. "You can't be here, mate," one of them said, grabbing his arm. "This is a restricted military facility." "I need to talk to someone," Lawson insisted, his voice desperate. "About convoy noise. I have an idea. I have drawings." "Everyone's got ideas, Yank," the officer replied. "Now, clear off before we throw you in the brig." They were physically escorting him out the door, pushing him back into the street, when a sharp voice called from across the lobby. Wait. The speaker was Commander Peter Gretton, a 29-year-old Royal Navy officer who had commanded escort groups for 2 of the bloodiest years of the war. He had just returned from Convoy ONS-5, where he had lost 13 merchant ships to wolf packs in a single running battle. He was exhausted, furious, and desperate for any edge against the U-boats that were slaughtering his men. "What?" Gretton asked, his voice tight. "What did you say about convoy noise?" Lawson, standing between the 2 patrolmen, explained, the words tumbling out quickly. He talked about the engine room, the sinking ship, the hollow boom, and then the silence. He explained his concept, water-dampening machinery vibration. Gretton listened, his arms crossed, his face a mass of stone. When Lawson finished, the commander said flatly, "That is the most ridiculous thing I have heard this month. Water inside a ship is called sinking, Mr. Lawson. Now if you control it," Lawson blurted out. "Not if it's in chambers, small chambers around propeller shaft bearings, against the engine mounts. You're not flooding the whole ship, you're creating. He searched for the word. Acoustic insulation. Gretton, who was already turning to walk away, froze. He turned back slowly. "Say that again." "Acoustic insulation, sir. Water. It absorbs vibration, better than air, better than steel. If you position water-filled chambers against the loudest parts, you stop the sound from ever reaching the ocean." "I know what acoustic insulation is," Gretton said, his eyes narrowing. He looked at Lawson, really looked at him. He didn't see a cook. He saw a man who had just spoken a language he didn't expect. "Come with me." March 25th, 1943. HM Dockyard, Liverpool. Gretton brought Lawson to the corvette HMS Sunflower, currently in dry dock for repairs. "If this works," Gretton said, his voice low, "and that is a massive if we test it here. Small scale. No one needs to know. Not the admirals, not the architects. No one." Over 3 frantic days, Lawson, Commander Gretton, and the Sunflower's skeptical chief engineer, Lieutenant James Whitby, jury-rigged a prototype. It was crude, it was ugly. They welded empty oil drums around the corvette's propeller shaft housing, then filled them with seawater. They positioned stacks of sandbags to simulate the weight of water-filled bladders against the engine mounts. According to every single regulation of the Royal Navy, it was completely unauthorized, vandalism of a king's vessel. March 28, 1943. They ran the first test. The Sunflower motored out into the Mersey River at low speed. A British submarine, HMS Trespasser, participated in the secret, unauthorized test, submerging 500 yards away with its hydrophones active. Lawson stood on the Sunflower's deck, holding his breath, his hands shaking. The Trespasser surfaced. Its captain signaled to Gretton on the bridge. "Heard you clear as day. Commander." "Engine noise, prop cavitation. Same as always." Failure. Gretton's face fell. Whitby, the engineer, muttered, "Told you it was bloody stupid." But Lawson was looking, observing. "Wait, look at the drums," he said, pointing. "We filled them when the ship was in dry dock. They're not full now. Look, they're leaking. They've drained through the seams. We need to seal them. We need to make them watertight." Gretton ran his hand through his hair, his career flashing before his eyes. "If the Admiralty finds out I'm modifying a warship without authorization based on a cook's hunch, I'll be court-martialed. I'll be finished." Lawson looked him dead in the eye. "And if the Admiralty finds out you're sinking 20 ships a week because we're too proud to test a cook's idea, we lose the war." Gretton stared at him a long, agonizing moment. The cook or the court-martial? 3 more days, he said finally, then this experiment ends, one way or another. They worked around the clock. This time, they did it right. They welded sealed steel chambers and added experimental water-filled rubber bladders, pressing them hard against the engine mounts. They created what naval engineers would one day call liquid acoustic dampening. April 2nd, 1943. The second test. The Sunflower motored out again, this time at full speed. The HMS Trespasser submerged 1,000 yards away. Minutes passed. The river was silent. More minutes passed. No signal. The Trespasser surfaced, its captain on the conning tower, binoculars to his eyes. He looked confused. Gretton's signal status. The reply came back, and Gretton's face went white. He turned to Lawson. Say that again. The signalman repeated the message. At 400 yards, sir, you disappeared. Whatever you did to that ship, it works. Lawson closed his eyes, gripping the rail. His hands were still shaking. It works. April 3rd, 1943. Admiralty Boardroom, London. Commander Gretton requested an emergency meeting with Rear Admiral Sir Max Horton, the Commander-in-Chief of Western Approaches. Horton was a legend, a hardened submariner from the First World War, arguably the most important and most feared man in the Royal Navy. He entered the room with 3 other senior officers and Dr. Harold Burrow, the same chief naval architect who, just weeks before, had declared acoustic dampening impossible. And with Commander Gretton was Thomas Patrick Lawson. The Admiral's aides were horrified. A merchant cook in the Admiralty boardroom? One whispered, Gretton doesn't care. He stood and presented the test results from the HMS Sunflower. Hydrophone detection range, Gretton said, his voice clear and steady, reduced from 12 miles to 400 yards. He paused, letting the number sink in. A 97% reduction in acoustic signature. The room erupted. This is preposterous. Dr. Burrow snapped, his face red. He stood up. You've conducted unauthorized modifications to a Royal Navy vessel based on suggestion of a cook. A cook who understands acoustics better than your entire department. Gretton fired back. Commander, you are wildly out of line, barked Captain Edmund Rushbrook, the Director of Naval Intelligence. This kind of reckless experimentation, without oversight, without theoretical review, it could compromise... Compromise what, sir? Gretton interrupted. The room was stunned into silence. Gretton was risking his entire career right here. Our current system, he pressed on, our current system of letting U-boats hear us from 50 miles away. That system is working brilliantly, isn't it? 567,000 tons of shipping would agree. Admiral Horton raised a hand. Silence. He turned not to Gretton, not to Burrow, but to Lawson. Lawson was acutely, painfully aware that he was a 28-year-old American high school dropout, addressing the most powerful naval commanders in the British Empire. Explain it to me, Mr. Lawson, Horton said, his voice quiet. Simply, Lawson swallowed. Sir, ship machinery creates vibration. That vibration travels through the steel hull and into the water. But water itself. It absorbs vibration far better than air or steel. He pointed to the test data. If you position water-filled chambers, sealed chambers, against the propeller shafts, against the engine mounts, you create barriers, you create insulation, you stop the sound from ever reaching the ocean. It violates basic engineering principles, Dr. Barlow insisted, appealing to Horton. Water inside a ship's structure creates massive weight distribution problems. Stability issues, corrosion, it's madness. Water in sealed chambers, sir. Lawson corrected him, his voice gaining strength, positioned specifically for dampening, not flooding. It's not a stability issue. It's an acoustic one. And we tested it. It works. One test, Burrow scoffed, under controlled conditions in a river with a friendly submarine. That is hardly conclusive proof for combat conditions in the North Atlantic. Admiral Horton leaned back in his chair. The silence in the room was deafening. He was the judge. What, Horton asked, would it take to retrofit a convoy? Captain Rushbrook threw his hands up. Admiral, you cannot be serious. This would require modifying hundreds of ships, diverting steel, diverting dockyard crews, installing this unproven technology based on test results. Gretton interrupted, his voice like ice, based on the fact that in March we lost nearly 100 ships because they heard us coming, based on the fact that if we do not do something different, we will lose this war by autumn. The room was divided. The experts versus the evidence. The bureaucracy versus the crisis. Dr. Burroughs spoke carefully this time, as if to a child. Admiral, even if this concept possesses a modicum of merit, its implementation presents insurmountable obstacles. We face the daunting task of retrofitting 2,400 merchant ships. 30:04. Our dockyards are operating at full capacity. The steel is urgently needed for construction of new escort vessels. We are looking at a minimum of 6 weeks in dry dock per ship. It doesn't take 6 weeks, Lawson interjected quietly. Every head in the room swiveled in his direction. Mr. Lawson, Admiral Horton cautioned. The prototype on the Sunflower, sir, the real one. It took only 3 days. It's not a complex feat of engineering. 30:30. You're simply welding sealed chambers around existing structures and flooding them with seawater. Any dockyard crew can accomplish it. Any ship's engineer can maintain it. Lawson paused, taking a breath before making his decisive move. And you don't need to retrofit every ship. Not yet. Just test it. Test it in a real convoy. 6 ships. That's all I'm requesting. 6 ships. What if I'm right? A tense silence filled the room. 30:56. Admiral Horton rose to his feet. Instantly, everyone else in the room followed suit. The Admiral walked to the window, gazing out at the Thames. His back was to the room, seemingly contemplating the potential loss of the war against the word of a mere cook. Finally, he turned. Commander Gretton, you will retrofit 6 merchant ships in Convoy 184. It departs Liverpool in 8 days. You will have your test. Gretton exhaled in relief. Yes, sir. Mr. Lawson, you will supervise the installation. You will train the engineers. Dr. Burroughs, Horton said, fixing the architect with a cold stare. You will provide Commander Gretton with any and all technical support he requires. 31:43. Even if you believe this to be utter insanity. Horton walked towards the door, pausing briefly. If it works, we implement it fleet-wide. If it fails, Commander Gretton, you will spend the remainder of this war commanding a minesweeper in the Orkney Islands. Clear? Crystal, sir, Gretton replied. Horton cast one last look at Lawson. Mr. 32:06. Lawson, I don't know if you're a genius or a madman, but I do know that we are desperate. Do not make me regret this. Lawson swallowed hard. I won't, sir. April 11th to 18th, 1943. HM Dockyard, Liverpool. It was a frantic race against time. 6 merchant ships were selected. The SS Daniel Webster, the James Herod, the John Davenport, the Samuel Elliott, the Benjamin Kite, and Lawson's own ship, the SS William Eustace. The installation was exactly as Lawson had described, brutally simple. 32:45. Teams of welders worked around the clock. They welded cylindrical steel chambers, 24 inches in diameter and filled with seawater, around the main propeller shaft housings. They installed water-filled rubber bladders, pressed tightly against the engine mounts and the steam line supports. Total added weight per ship, 18 tons. Total installation time, 64 hours per vessel. Naval engineers were openly skeptical. It looks like someone jury-rigged a plumbing system into the engine room, one muttered. He was entirely wrong, but the test didn't lie. Before modification, a Liberty ship's acoustic signature was detectable at 7 miles. After modification, it was only 0. For miles, the ships had become 29 times quieter. April 22nd, 1943. Convoy on 184 departed Liverpool. 43 merchant ships in 9 columns, escorted by 6 corvettes and 2 destroyers. The 6 silent ships were spread throughout the formation. 2 on the starboard columns, 2 port, and 2 in the center. No one had informed the convoy commodore about the experiment. No one had informed the U-boats. 34:09. The test would be live. German naval intelligence had tracked the convoy's departure. 37 U-boats, comprising Wolfpack Group MIs, deployed in patrol lines directly across the convoy's expected route. They were waiting. They were listening. April 25th, 1943, Mid-Atlantic, 2:14 a.m. Aboard U-264. Captain Lieutenant Hartwig meticulously studied his charts. 34:37. His hydrophone operator had been tracking the convoy sounds for 6 hours, But he was perplexed. Contact weakening, her Capitan. Original bearing 29 degrees to Nero, but the signal is intermittent. Some ships are very loud. Some are almost silent. Looks frown. Intermittent? That's impossible. Either you hear a convoy or you don't. Jawohl, Kapitän. But I am tracking multiple signatures. Some ships are clear at 40 kilometers. 35:06. Others, they disappear at 5 kilometers. It makes no sense. Looks ordered you 264, the periscope depth. Through the scope, he saw the convoy, dark shadows against a dark sky. But something was undeniably wrong. His hydrophone should be picking up all 43 ships. Instead, he was only tracking 27, no, not 16, 6, 35:34. The other 10 were simply too far away. But 6 ships, scattered throughout the convoy, were generating no acoustic signature at all. Lux made a decision that would ultimately save Allied lives. He targeted only the ships he could hear clearly. The modified vessels, now quieter than the surrounding ambient ocean noise, slipped past the entire wolf pack, completely and utterly undetected. April 27, 1943, 600 miles west of Ireland. The full force of Wolfpack Mize achieved contact with On 184. For over 18 hours, the attacks were relentless. It was a brutal running battle. By the time the sun rose, they had sunk 9 merchant ships. It was a terrible loss. 3,200 men in lifeboats, 47,000 tons of cargo on the ocean floor. But here was a critical statistic, the only one that truly mattered. Of the 9 ships sunk, 0 were the modified vessels. The 6 ships with Lawson's acoustic dampening system, including the SS William Eustis, survived untouched. When convoy on 184 reached New York on May 7th, Commander Gretton immediately signaled London. The message was simple, 37:03. Modified vessels showed 0 enemy engagement despite comparable positions within convoy formation. Acoustic dampening effective under combat conditions. Recommend immediate fleet-wide implementation. May 12, 1943. Admiral Horton reviewed the statistical analysis. The Western Approaches Command ran the numbers, and the numbers were staggering. 37:27. In March 1943, before acoustic dampening, the average U-boat detection range was 11 for nautical miles. Convoy ships sunk per Wolfpack engagement, a 31% loss rate. After acoustic dampening, from May to July 1943, the average U-boat detection range plummeted to 0, 6 nautical miles. Convoy ships sunk per Wolfpack engagement, a 7% loss rate. Ship losses dropped by a remarkable 85%. But here was the other side of the equation. U-boats that previously detected convoys from 50 miles away now had to approach within half a mile to hear them. This brought them into ASTIC range, into radar range, into visual range. The Wolfpack tactics collapsed because submarines cannot coordinate attacks on targets they cannot hear. 38:24. U-boat losses increased by 400%. May 24, 1943. Black May. May 1943 became known as Black May in German naval history. It was the month the Battle of the Atlantic turned decisively in favor of the Allies. Allied forces sank 41 U-boats. That was 25% of Germany's entire operational submarine fleet, gone in just 30 days. Gross Admiral Karl Donitz, the commander of the U-boat fleet, wrote in his war diary on May 24, 1943. His words were those of defeated man. The enemy has achieved technical supremacy, which has robbed the U-boat of its most effective weapon, surprise attack. Convoys have become nearly invisible to hydrophone surveillance. We can no longer predict attack positions. The old certainties have vanished. A captured German hydrophone operator from U-954, sunk on May 19th, told British interrogators, "We could not understand what happened. Sometimes we heard convoy sounds from a great distance." 39:36. Other times, ships were practically on top of us before we detected them. It was as if the ocean itself had become silent. By July 1943, 847 Allied merchant ships had received Lawson's acoustic dampening modifications. Installation time dropped to just 48 hours per ship. The total cost, $20,000 per vessel. 40:05. From May through December 1943, Allied merchant ship losses dropped to 329 vessels, down from 729 in the previous 8 months. U-boats destroyed in that same period, 237. Estimated lives saved, 4,200 merchant seamen, 4,200 men who would have died in sinkings, who instead went home. The Battle of the Atlantic wasn't won. It would continue until May 1945, but the tide had turned. 40:39. The hunters had become the hunted. After the war, the testimonials were unequivocal. In 1946, Admiral Sir Max Horton wrote in his memoir, among the many innovations that secured victory in the Atlantic, radar, Huff Duff, escort carriers, none were as simple or as devastatingly effective as Lawson's acoustic dampening system. A cook with no engineering training solved a problem that had baffled our best scientists. Commander Peter Gretton, the man who risked his career on a hunch, wrote in his 1964 book, Convoy escort commander Tommy Lawson never fired a shot in anger. He never commanded a ship, but he saved more lives than any captain in the Royal Navy. His genius was seeing what everyone else missed, that the solution wasn't more technology, but a better use of the ocean itself. The system became standard equipment, 41:40. It evolved into the modern Prairie Massacre noise reduction system, which is still used on American warships today. Modern systems use compressed air bubbles instead of static water chambers, but the principle, the physics, remains identical. Create an acoustic barrier to mass machinery noise. And what of the humble hero? Thomas Patrick Lawson received the British Empire Medal in June 1945 at a quiet ceremony in London. He refused interviews. He refused publicity. 42:14. When the New York Times asked for an interview in 1947, he declined, sending a short note. It said, I just noticed something and mentioned it. Other people did the real work. After the war, Lawson returned to Boston. He opened a small diner in Dorchester. He married. He had 3 children. And he never spoke publicly about his contribution to the Battle of the Atlantic. 42:40. His own wife didn't learn the full story until 1978, when a British naval historian tracked him down for a book. Lawson died in 1991 at the age of 76. His obituary in the Boston Globe was 3 sentences long. It described him as a retired restaurant owner and merchant marine veteran. It made no mention of the acoustic dampening system. 43:07. No mention of the 4,200 lives he saved. No mention of the fact that a high school dropout with a notebook had changed naval warfare forever. At his funeral, 3 elderly British naval officers attended, men who had served on convoy escorts in 1943, men who had survived because U-boats couldn't hear their ships approaching. 43:34. One of them, his hands trembling, placed a small handwritten note in Lawson's casket. It read, Because of you, we came home. In 2011, the U.S. Naval Academy added Thomas Lawson's story to its leadership curriculum. The summary is simple. Innovation doesn't require credentials. It requires observation courage and the willingness to challenge expert consensus. 44:04. Lawson succeeded not because he was trained in acoustics, but because he paid attention when no one else did. The most dangerous phrase in warfare isn't "that's impossible." It's "we've always done it this way." Sometimes the difference between defeat and victory is one person noticing what everyone else missed and having the courage to speak.